Hello and welcome to She Leads Collective podcast. I'm Mary Gregory and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is a space for honest conversations about what it really means to lead as a woman today and how we can all show up with more courage, care and clarity. You'll hear from inspiring women, powerful allies and bold truth tellers who are changing the game, not by playing tougher, but by leading smarter, softer and stronger. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the She Leads Collective podcast. What if the best ideas aren't the ones that change the world simply because the people behind them are never truly heard? Well, every day there are brilliant women leading organisations, solving complex problems and quietly transforming lives. Yet when we think of thought leaders, the same names often come to mind. And while there are definitely one or two female, on the whole, they're still overwhelmingly male. So I got wondering, why is that? Is it because women have fewer ideas, which I actually don't believe myself, but I want to explore that? Or is it because we've been taught to package expertise, confidence and influence in a very particular way? Well, my guest today believes thought leadership isn't about becoming famous or building a personal brand. It's about helping the right ideas reach the people who need them most. Sue Rizzello has spent more than 20 years helping organisations turn expertise into influence through powerful messaging, compelling stories, and authentic thought leadership. In this conversation, we're going to be exploring why so many talented women remain invisible, what holds them back from owning their expertise, and how we can redefine what influential leadership looks like. And I'm not talking about being out on the world stage. I'm talking about being visible within the field that you work and within the organisations in which you work. So if you've ever wondered whether your voice is enough or whether your ideas deserve a bigger platform, this conversation is for you. Sue, hello, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Mary. Glad to be here.
Well, it's a real pleasure that you've taken the time out. So let's kick off and talk a bit more about your work in the world of marketing. It's often described that marketing is all about helping ideas find their audience. How do you see that?
First of all, the term marketing is actually largely meaningless because it's a big nebulous bucket of different disciplines and different activities. I mean, there is a common core, of course, and to me, it's about helping people find you, understand you, helping them trust you, which is key, and then helping engage with you. Because that way they can buy you whatever it is that you need them to buy. But that's it.
Okay, and that applies, obviously, if you're running your own business and you're trying to sell something, that applies. But it also applies if you're somebody within an organization and you want to have influence and bring people on board to your ideas as well.
Absolutely. I mean, ideas are absolutely at the center of this. When I got into marketing, it was via PR, so that's all about communications. And we were trying to get people to engage with very, very complex technical things. And they don't engage with the detail, they engage with the idea behind it. And I don't think that's any different no matter what you're talking about.
So, Sue, what first drew you into the world of thought leadership almost 20 years ago?
It was a gradual realization, I think, of the role that the individuals played in the success of getting any communications campaign to be successful. The ones that worked were the ones that had the most compelling and active individuals communicating the ideas that you were trying to get across. Increasingly, I started to see interviewing them to get them to articulate those ideas and get really confident about how they were putting them out as key to making a client program work. And that gradually grew into I think real expertise in understanding how to get ideas out of people and then helping them to articulate them and then sometimes to helping them to then polish up and frame, write and create content around those ideas.
So you've said the phrase thought leadership is one of the most misunderstood terms in the business. What do people get most wrong?
Oh, it is completely abused as a term. Thought leadership. I think the main problem is that people really start thinking about it in the wrong place because it is really it's not about the individual, it's about their audience. And too many people approach thought leadership as how can I use thought leadership to help me in my career, me in my business, me to sell what I'm selling. Um, the reality is though that it's about a knowledge transfer. It's about a value transfer. And that value transfer has to be from you to them, not trying to accrue value to you. Because if you try to do that, it comes across as very inauthentic. It tends to be coloured with self-interest, which when it's a commercial message is or tends to have those undercurrents of sales, and you can spot it a mile off. Most thought leadership, in certainly in business, is advertising and sales messaging in disguise, or it's an attempt to simply jump into a debate, to create filler content for your social feeds or for your blogs. And as I say, to me, that's all starting in the wrong place.
Yes, so start with your audience and consider how you can fulfill your audience's needs rather than it's actually what I hear is take your ego out of it rather than it be a big thing of here am I with all these fantastic ideas, come listen to me. That's not what it's about at all. It's about what can I contribute? What does my audience need? What am I learning and understanding that I can share that my audience can benefit from?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, the word insight again is over abused, but actually it's has a lot wrapped up in it. If you can sort of think about what insight is it that I want this audience to walk away with after they've heard from me, read what I've read, you're in the right zone. If you think, what are they going to do? What are they going to buy? What are they going to change? You're kind of starting in the wrong place.
Great. So that's a really clear distinction from my perspective. And it's quite refreshing to hear it said out loud, actually, because I think people do misinterpret what it's about. So when you think about today's thought leaders, so what comes to my mind from the female point of view is Brené Brown and Mel Robbins. More recently, Mel Robbins, she's only been around last year or so. Those are really the only two female ones that immediately come to mind for me. Why are there still so fewer women?
I don't know whether some of it's got to do with that ego word that you mentioned a minute a little while ago. Um, Women should be thought leaders, could be thought leaders, and there are no shortage of smart women with brilliant ideas. So something is getting in the way of that. In reality, somebody could be a thought leader as long as they have something that they know or understand or see better than others. And I think this is where people like the Brene Brown or um, Martha Lane Fox, or there are some great women leaders out there. It's where they have really comprehended that they have something of value to get across. Um, Lots of women have value. It's just they haven't perhaps recognized it in the same way. Um, but there are, there are a lot of other reasons why there simply aren't as many women thought leaders who spring to mind.
I look at Brené Brown, for example, though, it's something about the way they've encapsulated and packaged their thinking. Because, I mean, she was first known for introducing the whole idea of being vulnerable as a leader and how powerful that was. And what stopped us being vulnerable was our relationship to shame and feeling ashamed. And when that first came out as a thought, was it resonated. So there's something about packaging something that really resonates with your audience and hence she kind of really rose from that, didn't she?
She did, and her TED talk from that original time is still referenced by a lot of people today. I'm not sure whether it's just about the packaging. I think it's also about the unpackaging. So what she did was she unpacked that idea of vulnerability. She made it into something that was usable and tangible, which meant that people could put it in the right place in their minds and start to address it. So leadership teams could pick it up and actually say that, this is something that we get that this is a thing. It wasn't a thing before. It was probably seen as a weakness.
Well, in many worlds it still is seen as a weakness, but fortunately she's brought it to light that it isn't a weakness, it's a strength. But I also think it's one of those things that's kind of on the edge of our subconscious that we kind of it's that thing when she said it, like it's all about being it's all, oh God, of course it is. It all makes sense now. So it's like on the edge of our thinking, but we can't quite put it into words, and she put it into words for us.
Yeah, I keep going back to the word articulation because I think it is really clear. You have to get things, boil things down to a really clear definition in your own mind before you can get people to engage with it in theirs. Because that way you can then, once you have your central idea, you can voice opinion, you can deliver insight, you can give perspective on it, but it has to be around some kind of solid core. One of the interesting things when you look at somebody like Brene Brown and a lot of the other sorts of successful women thought leaders is this doesn't just happen. It's really the people who set out to be a thought leader who become thought leaders. It doesn't happen by magic. It happens by design.
Right. Okay. So there was an intention then behind what they've been doing. So, for example, Mel Robbins, I can see that really clearly. Less so with Brené because she kind of just suddenly appeared.
Yeah, but with very, very well formed ideas. I mean, when I say intentions, that can be as simple as really working down and sitting down and taking the time to think around your subject.
Yes, and of course she's an academic, so she'll have done the research and had time to refine it and really hone it down.
Yep.
But bringing it back more to the everyday, because they are obviously two women thought leaders that we've mentioned there and have been around for quite some time. A lot of the women I talk to, this is when I'm thinking about the issue of confidence and visibility. So a lot of the women I talk to and work with, particularly those who are based in organizations, find it quite hard to find their voice. Partly because they've got their own dialogue going on about, I don't want to be seen as arrogant, I don't want to be boastful, all that sort of stuff going on. But also that there are the challenges, and this is a reality, that women do get talked over in meetings. They do suggest ideas that don't get acknowledged and then get taken by somebody else later on. That is a reality and has been proven in research time and again. What's your take on that? And what would be your advice to those women?
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because the kind of classic image of being good at this stuff is about being certain, loud, quite charismatic, highly visible, and it skews male, right? It really skews male in mindset. And I love your that vision of women having this inner dialogue. We have a multi-track brain in the way that men don't, and so we're always perhaps distracted by other things, thoughts of how's this going to come across. I don't think men are nearly as self-critical. They've got an opinion, they voice the opinion. They don't pause to think how people are going to receive this opinion. Women do. We're naturally more circumspect and perhaps respectful of other people. Um, we're more collaborative. We want to see that there's agreement around things. And I think that's one of the reasons we don't easily fit that guru on a stage stereotype when it comes to thought leadership. But yeah, I mean, the problem, I think it is confidence. I think there really is a confidence issue when it comes to speaking up in meetings, being talked over. It's if you don't have that strength and belief in yourself and confidence that you've really thought about what you're going to say. Um, it does hold you back. And I think we also face harsher judgment when we try, and we can face harsher criticism. There, dear. Yep, get back in your box. I mean, I certainly saw it in corporate life. I wasn't in corporate for very long, but it's burned into my brain how difficult it was in a technology business that was predominantly male, still heavily predominantly male at that point, just to get a word in edgeways. Because there's no gap, there's no pause. Men jump in, they don't pause to think, should I speak here? They're already going. And so the gaps that we're looking for don't happen.
So women often have to learn to jump in and be more opportunistic, maybe
They
as
do.
well in those situations, and also recognize what they have to contribute does have value. I think that's the most important thing. And I always take the view, even just asking a question is a way of getting your voice in the room. So you've got your presence felt. You made a fascinating observation, though, now that we're talking about the differences between men and women, that men tend to sell their experience while women tend to demonstrate understanding. Can you unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah, I mean it's a simple way of stating it because I think there are a number of strands to it. Because men are kind of assumed to be authoritative until they're proved otherwise, and so they don't seem to have any fear of saying, and this is based on my many years of experience in what it is, because they're having to do is reinforce an opinion people already probably have. We're talking gross generalities here. Women have to prove their credibility more than men. That is true. I don't think that any of the positive changes of the past, sort of couple of decades have changed that underlying thing. It's as true in trying to climb the corporate ladder as it is in trying to become a thought leader. It's hard to shatter the glass ceiling. We don't, that is true and proven to be true. Otherwise, there would be an even representation of senior managers across all industries, and it's not true. There are still too few female CEOs.
Okay, so that's how things are, and it's been proven that that's how things are. I think what we've got to look at then is how do we keep kind of chipping away at that? And it may take a lot more, maybe a couple more decades before we see any real change on that. I hope it doesn't take as long as that, but it's certainly something to keep building awareness around so that attitudes do start to change. So, how much of becoming influential then, Sue, is about the quality of thinking versus how it's communicated?
I think both are equally important, but having ideas, as we've said, is in, in a funny way not the difficult bit. We all have ideas. Um, it's especially when those ideas have formed over years, they formed through experience, they formed through you observing and gathering evidence, and so on. The ideas, they do have to be strong and robust, and you have to make sure that they are so. Thought leadership falls down when it's not credible. When it's not backed by something that could be knowledge backed, opinion backed, evidence backed. Sorry, knowledge and opinion, knowledge and evidence backed first, and opinion backed second, based on that evidence. Um, but the packaging does also matter, because the reality is you have to think about the practicality of communication, not just what you're going to say. Many great ideas have died because people couldn't communicate them. We've seen many instances of women who've been behind major technological breakthroughs, major breakthroughs in the war, um, and yet their voices were entirely silent. It wasn't that the ideas died; it was that the communication died and the recognition did.
Yes, and there's also something I remember the film Hidden Figures,
Hidden
which is all
figures,
about the
yes,
women at
brilliant.
NASA
Hmm.
and the fantastic contribution those women made
Mm,
to the success of the projects that they had at NASA, and yet they went completely unrecognized until that film came out, really.
yeah. Yes, and so I think and that was obviously that was highly influenced by women's role and the expectations of women at that point in history. We should be past that by now. Um, but the re you know in reality it's still hard to get your ideas over no matter who you are. Practical things like get how do you get this to the audience that needs to hear it have to be thought through. What's it going to take to seed a change of thinking or encourage people towards a change of behavior? Um, how will we really start a debate around this? This debate should be happening. How do I help make it happen, start it going?
Very good. And I really like the whole thing about keep your opinion until second. Don't put your opinion up front. Describe the situation, describe the story, the evidence, and then bring your opinion in second. That sounds powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think once you've established a dialogue, people will assume that expertise but you still have to, yeah, opinion only matters when it's a credible opinion.
So let's move on to thinking about how we find our voices, because I already talked about women that I work with or come across who find it hard to speak up or to get their voices out there within the organizational context, let alone within the bigger world. Many women worry that they're self-promoting. They don't want to be seen as arrogant or big-headed. Where do you think that comes from your perspective?
I think worrying about being self-promoting comes down to the confidence problem that we've already highlighted, but it's also supported by the fact that very few people are supporting and promoting women, and this is particularly a problem in corporate organizations. There's a lot of mentoring that happens. So women are mentored, even over mentored, but they are under sponsored. So they get lots of advice but they don't always get the advocacy that they should have internally to actually say, look, this person, this woman should become our leading voice on something. She is our leading subject matter expert. Um, and so if we're not put forward as the experts as often as men, of course, this is not exclusive. Some organizations are great at it, but a lot are not. If we're not put forward as the leading voice on something, if we're not put forward as the subject matter expert, it's quite hard because you've got to build it brick by brick yourself.
So getting that support, getting that sponsorship is fundamental, really. And also to line managers and senior managers, inviting them to consider who are the women on their teams that really could, the organization will benefit and they will benefit from making sure those women's voices are heard as well.
Yeah, I have to say I'm not really a fan of positive discrimination, but I think there has to be a continual pressure to recognize that everybody has the same value. And there that we still have an imbalance.
I think what I'm alluding to, and maybe I'll make it more explicit, is my experience in organizations is often the men get the opportunities and the women aren't getting them for all sorts of reasons, but one of them is because there's a lack of awareness as to who are the people I'm putting forward. So it's an invitation to senior leaders and to line managers to notice, are you giving your female team members equal opportunity to the men on your team? Are you putting them forward as much as you're putting the men forward as well? Because I think it's an unconscious bias often.
Oh yes, I'm sure it's unconscious. I think this is where personal brand and authentic visibility start to cross over though. And you talked about personal brand earlier, but these things are different, you know. So personal brand is about how people are perceived, how they're positioned, where they show up. Those things we can control if you know, then in establishing authentic visibility as an expert, a thought leader is coloured by that, but it's about something different. It's about what they stand for, the values they have, what the knowledge they have. That's the only bit that has to be backed by the credibility. Um, and evidence, your personal branding is something that you can build and shape and promote. That's the bit we have control over.
Yes. So you can be much more conscious and intentional around that. And then, of course, you build that consciously. And then you also start to build your reputation because it's then about how do you touch people and touch others. And then that might well influence your level of visibility throughout the organization. Because if you're building a credible brand, people will want to know more about what you're up to.
Absolutely. Personal branding and your visibility, your authenticity, your potential for thought leadership are inextricably linked. They're two sides of the same coin. You just have to kind of recognize them and address them. You need a plan for both.
What would that plan look like?
Um, I have I have a coaching model which is all about igniting those both sides of those. You need to sit down and really extract and think about all the different contributing factors that go into your personal brand. What, why are you the person you are, where you are, how you want that to evolve very differently from, okay, now what's my knowledge base, what's my experience, what's my value. The two things often come together in how people are trying to promote their own careers. There are, because thought leadership is actually something that has enormous value to organizations. And so you marry that up with a good plan to build your personal brand, you can actively support a career progression, make yourself attractive to your current employer, also to potential future employers. This is where external thought leadership starts to become valuable.
Yes, I can think of clients I've worked with where part of the program has been about building their external influence as well, not just for themselves, but on behalf of the organization they're working for as well. So they're building their own reputation, but they're also building the organization they're working for as well and becoming much more conscious of that. This is all fascinating stuff. So I'm really enjoying this conversation. So if somebody listening today has deep expertise but still feels invisible, where should they begin? You mention a plan. Should they begin with a plan, but does it happen before the plan?
I think it happens. It happens a little earlier in making sure you know what you want, because no plan is what something that we, in marketing, we always talk about the fact that if you don't know what the goal is, you cannot create the clear objectives. You cannot know whether you're achieving them. You cannot work out the path, so the strategy of how you're going to get there. So I think it definitely starts with that, and then yes, it needs some practical steps. It starts internally. Where do I stand? Who am I? It starts with some really fundamental stuff, which when you start exploring this with certainly with senior male leaders, they're always a bit taken aback that we go back to who they are and their motivations and how they see the world, and they're going, yes, but I want to be an expert in AI. It's more fundamental than that, so I think it has to start there.
Very good. Okay. Now, we've already talked a lot about the biases that go on that affect women stepping forward and that might affect their confidence, etc. But I would like to look at in a bit more depth into the systems that mean that women's voices are kept quiet, really. So, when it comes to networking, media representation, and whose voices get amplified, what are some of the less obvious barriers that women face?
I'll pick them. I'll talk about the media first, because that's obviously that's been central to my world for many years. Now, there have been studies done on this. In the media, there was a Reuters study which suggested that the media promotes male experts about 2 to 1 versus female experts, which I thought was quite interesting. I asked myself, and had to go looking to say, actually, how biased is the leadership within media, editorial roles? Is it that we're still suffering from male overload of male editors? Actually, it isn't. It's up to about 50% of senior UK media roles are female, which I find extraordinary if we are still looking to men to provide the expert comments. So that has to come down partly to who's available. There are systems out there which are built databases which are designed purely to help the media find experts. And I suspect, but I haven't been able to dig into it. I suspect that there are simply more male commentators out there listed than female commentators on different topics. It'll be something as practical and basic as that, that the names are not there. They can find 10 names of an expert on technology X, and only one of them is female. So it takes somebody to actively go, I'd like to do the female, have the female in. And of course, that's not the way editorial decisions are made.
So that's the media. Any other
Mhm.
invisible barriers that you think get in the way?
I think in business you reference networking, and I think that's definitely got a bias. Um, Networking organizations, networking, the whole concept of it um, was built a long time ago. It's emerged over a long time, at a time when, sort of men's role in business was more dominant than far more dominant than it is now. So I find it unsurprising that a lot of the networking groups and organizations, and I've tried out almost every single one that I can find, are terribly male in how they're structured. There is one, trying to think how to describe this, a notoriously clique-like networking organization franchise that is nationwide, very strong. You have these groups in every town and city in the UK. And it was set up by a man. It was built up by men. It has become a lot more female in the membership. If you go to a group, you'll find more women there than ever before. But the whole thing is based on a how big is my pile of referrals um, model, rather than an idea of collaborating and helping one another. It's a very male, how mine's bigger than yours kind of view. Um, Women tend to therefore be more active, and I see more enjoyment, more engagement in more open general networking sessions. Women thrive in those because they can be themselves. In the very highly structured networking ones, I see them definitely sort of pushed into a secondary position.
I definitely can concur with that because that's my experience, particularly those networking groups where you had to be there for 7 o'clock in the morning, which usually meant, leaving the house at about 6 o'clock. And if you've got children, as a single parent, how do you sort out the childcare and all that sort of stuff? Massive nightmare there. But also the whole 60-second, here's me in a 60-second snippet of who I am. I think that is to me, that's really inauthentic.
It is inauthentic. It can, however, be very good practice. There is something to be said, and we always talk about, sort of everybody needs an elevator pitch to say who they are really succinctly and clearly in a way that's going to make them stand out and be remembered. Um, those types of groups are very good for making you do that. I remember many times I would practice my spiel in the car on the way over, while still sort of rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. You and I both know the group we're talking about. It is notorious for this. But all the breakfast clubs have the same sort of, and many organizations have the same challenges. I gave up on that particular membership after 2 years. A, getting very little from it, and secondly, because I got up, my shoes had gone moldy because we were living in a caravan while our house was being done up. The shoes had gone moldy, and I just threw them in the bed, got back in the bin, got back into bed, and I never went back. I thought, that's it. That just sums it up, how little I want to go to this
Yes. I
this
also
group.
think though the contrast to what we talk about for women like to network differently. They're much more relational. So open spaces where they can meet people, have proper in-depth conversations, build those relationships. That is the sort of networking that tends to work for women rather than this stand up and deliver immediately type networking.
Yes, I've also seen women thrive in kind of round table type networking groups, as long as they don't have the unfortunate experience of there being somebody in the table or more than one people on the table who tend to talk over them, because we get exactly the same problem as occurs in meetings in those scenarios. But round table networking events tend to be a melting pot that sometimes, some you win, some you lose. Sometimes you have an amazing session, and other times you walk away from the table going, God, that was an awful group. And it tends to be because you were talked over.
So let's come back, having explored some of those invisible biases in a way, very, very subtle biases anyway. Let's come back to the world of the organization because a lot of our listeners will be working for organizations. They may be senior leaders within those organizations. What responsibility do you think organizations have for creating more diverse thought leaders rather than simply celebrating the same ones?
I think they absolutely have a responsibility, but they also need to wake up to the fact that they are wasting huge value. The wasted brilliance that they have, and the ideas that the women in their organization have is an asset that should be celebrated and liberated as much as with men. So why wouldn't they be doing it? It's not just you must do it, but why wouldn't you do it? That's crazy. Thought leadership has real value to organizations when they come across as being committed, knowledgeable, and having huge experience of overcoming particular problems. They're at the forefront of a debate on a pertinent issue that their prospects have. It puts them in a much better position. It opens doors for them. It gets them automatically shortlisted. It gets them invited to things. So that, that has tangible business and revenue growth opportunity. You should be looking at every corner and every gender of your organization to unlock that.
And I take the view that, organizations invest enormous amounts of time and money in recruiting really talented people. So it's making sure that you support your talent and also capitalize on the thought leadership they're bringing into the organization. I think that's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's just as important to make sure that all this knowledge and credibility, oh, sorry, all this knowledge and experience is surfaced internally as well as externally, and captured. Because the other thing which sort of waste I see is people letting really smart people emerge and thrive and become thought leaders, and then they leave, and all that expertise has gone with them because nobody actually worked at capturing it and generating the next generation of experts.
Okay, so there's something there about making sure organizations capitalize on the legacy people are bringing. They don't just let them walk out the door without actually noting what have they brought to the organization? How can we keep some of that here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on to being a bit more practical now. If someone wanted to become recognized for their thinking rather than just their job title, what practical advice would you give?
Well, I've already said you need to have a plan. You need to really sit down and map out what is it that you want to be known for? What is it that you bring to the organization? How could that be leveraged given the right opportunity? There is part of this which is about presenting the desire. So there is no point having this desire to become known if you don't tell anybody. Now, I understand some people will perceive some risk in doing that, stepping forward. If you're sticking your head above the parapet, you're saying, I could be doing more. You're saying, you're not using me enough. But if you're line manager or the head of comms or PR doesn't know that you're an expert in something, or that you really have some wish to become part of an external voice, how can they possibly help you to do so? So there is that, and I think that you also have to remember that there are some fundamental skills that maybe you're not displaying, and that can be as simple as that thing about stepping, as sort of speaking out in meetings about your area of expertise. That's practice. That's practice and its mechanisms. Um, I've often talked about the fact that, when I was in corporate, I would literally practice my lines to break into conversations in meetings in the mirror in the bathroom in the morning, because I found myself defaulting to, excuse me, may I, could I inject a thought here? It's like, why am I asking for permission? So I had to drive some of those requesting words out. I know, because I've been told, this came across as really aggressive. I got a reputation for being quite aggressive. Um, but actually, we're told we need to be more aggressive, but not too much, you know.
More assertive, but not
Yeah,
too much, yeah.
yeah.
And but I'm
Yeah.
also fascinated, what lines would help you interrupt the meeting or get your voice heard in the meeting that aren't asking permission? What were some of those lines?
Oh, I can't remember, but they were all similar. They were all about removing the question from it. It was, I have a view on this. It was more statement than question.
Yes, yes. And then that was classically seen as you being aggressive when
Yeah,
you did that.
because sometimes that statement was, that's wrong, that you're not seeing this correctly, rather than, I'm sorry, I think you've got that a bit wrong.
Okay, really interesting, because women do, when women are more assertive, they get seen as aggressive,
Oh,
whereas
they do.
men tend to get seen as leaders. So it's really interesting. Another nice little bias sneaking its way in there. So, what habits separate people whose ideas spread from those whose ideas stay hidden?
The habit. Well, one is that one about practicing. Get in the habit of practicing before you go into meetings. And I think probably the best habit that I had. Um, uh, you need to keep reminding yourself that becoming the expert, becoming the leader on something is not about brilliance. It's based on hard work. And if you're doing that, then what would stop you? So I think these are habits, these are mindset habits more than they are action habits, you know.
I also, and this is only because of the feedback I've received over time, which is reframe it rather than reframe it as bragging, reframe it as an act of generosity because you're actually giving something. If you're updating somebody on how you're getting on in a project, if you're sharing about a new idea, you've looked at how to tackle a customer issue or whatever, you are helping other people, by sharing those ideas and those insights. That's an act of generosity. It's not about bragging.
Absolutely. And it goes right back to the top of our conversation, which is about thought leadership being a value exchange. You're giving the value to other people. That's where they will perceive the value in you.
So, Sue, looking ahead, what would success look like if we truly had equal representation when it came to thought leadership?
I suppose it would just be what we see, wouldn't it? It would be, what we see in because the reality is women change the world constantly. We're always doing it. But I'd like us to be seen to be doing it. More celebration. If we get this right, then if people say sort of name a thought leader, they're not going to say Elon Musk or Richard Branson, the archetypical guru on a stage. They're going to say not just Brene Brown, but other names, because her name is almost always the only one that comes up when you ask people. And it's not all about soft subjects. I want to see women as the acknowledged experts in the sciences, in all the sort of STEM subjects where we still lag behind, not just the experts in emotional things. Um, there's no balance there at the moment, and there really should be. And I think there's work to do in the media to enable that. We could kind of do with those female editors, the 49%, giving us a bit of a hand to support this cause, but not disproportionately. But I don't think they've realised it yet.
Well, maybe because they're in a system that
Mm.
historically has worked in a certain way. And it's
Yep.
about, they maybe they don't appreciate the system that they're within. So what's one conversation you hope more leaders start having?
So I am increasingly hearing that leadership teams are talking about things like thought leadership. They're saying this is something we must do. But instead of thinking about how do we do this, I want them to be thinking about who do we have much more deeply, because I think at the moment it's secondary. They don't look at the people, they look at the subjects they want to win rather than looking internally. And because if they look, they're going to see women as well as men with great ideas and great potential.
And what are your final thoughts you'd like to impart to our listeners today?
Oh, I don't know if I have anything particularly profound, but leadership is and thought leadership is about standing out without worrying about it, without having qualms and concerns. I think it's about not being afraid to say what you think, even if it seems a bit risky.
Yes. So being able to go with that. Sometimes we feel uncertain, but go with the uncertainty and still say what you
Yeah,
think is important to
yeah,
say.
yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much. And Sue, how can people connect with you?
Well, I'm LinkedIn is often the best way to connect with me. I'm lucky to have a name where there's only one of me. And I love to connect with people and have conversations from there. They can also book appointments with me from the same place. So
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. I've really appreciated some of the insights that you've highlighted for us today and how important it is for just in leadership to open our eyes to all the possibilities of the people that we work with and what they might be thinking and what their ideas are.
it's been a great conversation, Mary. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to the She Leads Collective podcast. If this episode resonated with you, follow the show or share it with a friend and leave a quick review below. Or leave us a comment. Change happens through conversation, so let's keep this one going. Listen out for the next episode and join me as we keep lifting the lid on the stories that matter. Take care and keep leading with heart.